Helen Keller once communicated that the only thing worse than being blind was having sight and no vision. Vision is such a key piece to our leadership and the future. And when we think about vision, we need to realize we're talking about the future, who we will become, who we will be in the future. And certainly when we discover the vision and we begin to put in place that vision that will lead and guide God's people, we need to take into account that it's about the future of God's plans for our lives. One of the great accounts that we find in Scripture is found in the book of Genesis. It is the relationship between Abram and Lot. Later we know in Genesis chapter 17 that Abram's name will be changed to Abraham. Lot was Abram's nephew, and in Genesis chapter 13 we find that there was a conflict that was taking place between the herdsmen of both of these men. They had become so prosperous, so productive that the land would not contain them. And so as a result, Abram calls Lot together and says, "Look out over the land. Choose where you want to go, and I will go in the other direction." Lot looks out over the land and he chooses that which is down near Sodom and Gomorrah. Of course, later that becomes a great consequence, and the decision brought consequences as a result. But what I find interesting in this text is the fact that it's not until Lot leaves that God shows up. And when God shows up, He speaks to Abram, and He tells him to lift up his eyes and look from the place where you stand, northward, southward, eastward, westward, all that your eyes behold, I will give to you and to your descendants forever. There are three parts to this particular conversation that I want us to focus on. Number one, he says, lift up your eyes and look. When it comes to vision, it's not about what we can physically see. It's about what we see through the eye of faith. But the problem is, far too often, we either cover our eyes because we don't want to see it, or we put on some sort of blinders that give us tunnel vision that we are only able to see in one direction, and we are unable to see in any other way. We need to do what God told Abram to do. Lift up your eyes and look. We might be amazed at what we see if we would just open our eyes and look. Secondly, he says, from the place where you stand. I want you to think about this particular thought, because oftentimes when we do look, we tend to look somewhere else. We're looking at overseas. Over the years, I have seen so many people involved in short-term mission work, and they will spend countless hours and great amounts of money to go somewhere else in the world. And don't misunderstand me, there are people all over this world who need to know Jesus. But sometimes we need to just lift up our eyes and look from the place where we stand. We need to realize that the need is great right here in our own communities. Even when Jesus told the disciples in the book of Acts that they would be His witnesses, He said first in Jerusalem, and then to Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the world. We need to lift up our eyes and look, but we also need to do so from the place where we stand. And then third, he tells him to look northward, southward, eastward, and westward. And all that your eyes behold, I will give to you and to your descendants forever. I don't believe it was by accident that God told Abram to look in every direction, because to miss looking in a particular direction was to miss possessing what God had promised him and his descendants forever. What really amazes me about this particular account is that Abraham never saw the fulfillment of that promise in his lifetime. In fact, it would be more than 400 years later, after his descendants were captives in Egypt, and that Moses would come and lead them out by God's outstretched arm to bring them to the land that God had promised Abram and to his descendants forever. But it took Abram lifting up his eyes and looking from the place where he stood, northward, southward, eastward, westward, to look in every direction and to know and to trust that what God had promised He would fulfill to His descendants forever. When we think about vision as leaders today, we need to realize that our vision must be the kind that will outlive us. That what we are doing is we're creating a vision for the future that will take us beyond our life and our descendants, to prepare a future for those who will come, who will be a part of the Lord's church throughout the generations ahead. We need a vision that is built upon a future that we can see through the eyes of God, and to know that He is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us. May we work to create a vision for the future that incorporates our God who is great and who will bring about that which is needed for His people.